This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I speak with Valerie Day and John Smith from the band NU SHOOZ. We have a very wide-ranging discussion, talking about writing songs in batches of 10, synesthesia amongst musicians, how writer's block is just a fallacy, spotting sessions, and the two types of film directors. We cover a lot of ground in this interview. Enjoy. Hey, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to have two guests, not just one guest, but two guests, Valerie Day and John Smith of NU SHOOZ. Valerie Day, first of all, is a Portland-based pop and jazz singer and member of the Grammy-nominated band NU SHOOZ, which she founded with her husband, John Smith. Valerie was born into a fourth generation of a musical Northwestern family, and she was blessed to be raised amidst a very supportive, arts-rich home life. A musical mother paved the way for a fantastic journey from the ground zero trajectory of 80s pop chartdom with NU SHOOZ to jazz, big band, and orchestral performances with the Oregon Symphony. Her musical collaborator and the founder of NU SHOOZ is John Smith, who also joins us today. John is a prolific composer, writer, and visual artist. As a composer, he's written hundreds of scores for film, commercials, and modern dance. And yet, after more than a 27-year hiatus, they've come together, and NU SHOOZ is back with a new album called Bagtown. It's my pleasure to have them both on the show today. Valerie, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thanks for having us.
Thanks.
So, first of all, share with us what's going on in your collective world just now. What are you both working on just now? Obviously, you've got the NU SHOOZ stuff. Is that the primary focus of what you're currently doing?
It's taken over again. After many years of doing other things, it's pretty much the primary directive right now.
And how does that feel? Because you've obviously been involved in doing other things. You know, Valerie, you were very focused. I know you had jazz albums and other things were going on. John, you've been very focused on the films and the commercial music side of things. So how does it feel kind of going back to some of this music, but also creating new music for that group?
You know, we thought we'd never do it again, but we're having the best time.
Yeah, I think this has to be one of the best time periods in our lives, actually, because we did get to do a lot of other things, and we never thought we'd do this again. So it's a wonderful surprise.
Yeah, surprise is the operative word.
Yeah, and it's really wonderful to be, to be in this place with music where we can do it again and do it full on and have the best time that we've ever had with it. When we did it in the 80s, we were obviously a lot younger, and in that time period of life where we were still really working hard to prove ourselves, mostly to ourselves, you know what I mean? It's like you want to make sure that people know that you can actually do this thing, music, and you have to, you just have a different mindset about it. Now, we've done a lot of things, and so we can kind of, it's not like we don't care anymore about the output, because we do. There's always more to learn, which is the wonderful thing about music, but we can kind of sit back and enjoy the ride a lot more and not be so concerned about the outcome.
You don't have to be so kind of obsessed about or you don't have that kind of pressure around you that would have come from having to do all the big label stuff in the past as well. So where did it all begin for both of you? How did you first get involved in get the music bug? I mentioned, Valerie, at the top of the show, you were obviously born into a very musical family, but what was the kind of first instruments, the first things you started doing musically? And John, were you in that same situation of coming into being in a very musical family as well?
Yeah, there was a lot of music in our family. I had an uncle who was a trombone player in a Dixieland band, and my mother played great piano. But, you know, that's not enough to tip you over the edge. I was going to be a pathologist, and from about age 7 to 15, I thought that was my path. And then one day I walked into the school library and I heard Hendrix. and that ended my medical career. And I just went, got obsessed and never looked back.
Yeah.
Been playing ever since.
And I never thought I would become a musician, especially a singer, because my mom was such an amazing classical operatic singer. She had a world-class voice and sang with the orchestras in Seattle and Portland, and won the Metropolitan Opera auditions and went to San Francisco and studied. And I mean, she just was amazing. And my dad had a wonderful voice too. He had a barbershop quartet in medical school called the Forceps Four, and they won all kinds of competitions, and my parents sang together. So it was like, okay, you guys, that's your thing. I was interested in dance and some visual art, and I knew I wanted to be an artist. And at about age 15, I realized that probably I would get hired to play at bar mitzvahs, but not dance at them. If, later on in my career, I was thinking ahead.
To bar mitzvahs.
Right, to practicality. Like, how am I going to make money doing this? So I switched from dance to music, but I started playing percussion first, actually. I'd had piano lessons and stuff when I was younger, but jazz sounded weird in our household because my mom, it was like there was some kind of psychic radio where when I tried to learn how to play jazz piano, it just was wrong. Probably because my mom thought I would become a heroin addict if I was a jazz musician.
And when you had that when you kind of brought the band, I mean, John, you started the group originally, and then when you started kind of building the musician, were you already kind of working together and doing stuff together at that point, or is that how you first met? How did it come about?
No, we weren't. Valerie wasn't playing anything when we first met.
I was still dancing.
Yeah, she was taking 5 classes a week or something like that, and I played, but hadn't landed on a focus for it yet. Then we both ended up playing in. Valerie was playing in an African band, and I was playing piano in a salsa calypso band. And I took a trip to New York, and I heard all the real Puerto Rican Afro-Cuban bands, Celia Cruz and Tito Puente and stuff. And I came back from there saying, hey, I'm not Cuban or Puerto Rican. I really want to do something American. I want to do a soul band with horns. And it took about another year before I found enough people to start NU SHOOZ. And then another year before we added a horn section, and then it started to really go.
But the band actually lasted altogether 14 years.
Yeah.
And 7 of those years were playing in clubs. We went from a 4-piece to a 12-piece to an 8-piece to a 6-piece. I mean, there were like 50 different people in that time period that went through the band because it was a band. It's, hard to keep people together.
Yeah, and in Portland, we got to play a lot. We played 4 hours a night, 3 to 5 nights a week. It was an amazing period here.
So that was a bit like the Beatles had Hamburg, doing the clubs in Hamburg. That was your 10,000 hours compressed into that time by playing all those clubs and everything. Around was it mostly the Pacific Northwest that you were playing at that point?
Yes. We had an old school bus that we converted and that broke down every time we went across the mountains. And it was, it was an adventure.
Yeah, we had to eat the bass player.
and then it's interesting because this, obviously, I mentioned this is the first time we've had guests on the show. We've had 2 guests on the show, but it's not you're what you can often call, I think psychology called creative pairs, where you have, Lennon McCartney, you have, I've just kind of suddenly forgotten now, but Carole King and I can't remember
Jerry Goffin.
Jerry Goffin, yeah. So in music, that's a very established thing to have these kind of creative pairs. So when you started working together, was it quite obvious that there was something there, kind of, there was a kind of spark there creatively?
No.
No.
Not at all. In fact, I'm not sure it's there now. Is it?
I think we work together better than we ever have.
Actually, yeah.
So, and when you first kind of came together, and you were kind of out performing together, writing together as well, I would imagine that also creates some friction, because probably no one's getting enough sleep. Everyone's you have to go show to show to show. So, how did you not kill each other in those early years as you're having to go from one show to the other? And it's all, as I mentioned at the start, it's a pretty quick, the trajectory right at the start there.
Ignorance is bliss, for one thing. We had no idea really how the music business worked or what we were doing, and we were just working so much that that we were writing all the time, because to keep 4 hours of material fresh is, I'm here to tell you, it's impossible. You can't. You always end up at the end of the night saying, "Oh God, we got to play that," And for us, it was "Shotgun" and "Rescue Me." I think people say, "How do we write our hit?" It was just a part of a batch of tunes that, by God, someday we're going to have enough songs to not play "Shotgun" or "Rescue Me."
And when you were doing this, you were writing in the band bus on the way to gigs. Were you just writing anywhere you had a spare moment to write?
Oh yeah, I worked in batches of 10 and tried to finish 2 every week for Wednesday rehearsal, and so it was a very assembly line kind of process almost, and we turned out tons of material. Some songs I think about now. I'll be driving or something and I shudder. God, you wrote that, But to write one great song, you got to write 100 bad ones.
And how did you mentioned you were doing a lot of clubs at that point as well. I was watching a David Byrne video the other day. He was talking about how the location, the place, the room that you're actually playing influences the music that you're creating, that you're writing. Almost you're writing for the room sometimes as well. So
yes.
were you finding that when you were writing?
He wrote that book, How Music Works,
yeah.
and I recommend it to everybody. And he talks about how the acoustics in CBGBs affected the sound of the Talking Heads. And I believe that's true for us, too, that we were writing for the clubs that we were playing in and going and hearing other bands.
Another thing that was quite remarkable about that time period was that the club that we played in the most was called the Last Hurrah in Portland, Oregon. And the owners of that club required that you did a certain amount of original music. They didn't want it to be a top 40 club. And so that was another impetus for John to be writing original music. And that doesn't really exist anywhere that I know of today.
Yeah.
So it's been flipped around the other way, hasn't it, today? We bands are told to go and play top 40 stuff instead of original material.
Well, the big thing now is tribute bands.
Yeah.
So they're doing fantastically well, especially if the original artists are, partly dead or mostly dead or all the way dead.
Yeah, well, AC/DC's not dead, and there's the AC/DC bands and Led Zeppelin bands. And not
to denigrate them, they do an amazing job, and they do a thing for people. But that was it's just different. It's like apples and oranges.
Yeah, really, Portland in the 80s was very supportive of songwriting. So we were really lucky to be in the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
So Portland itself, for an outsider like myself, it has a reputation of being, a little bit kind of kooky, a bit weird. There's got lots of kind of interesting things. It's definitely not a formulaic kind of town as a place. What influence did the actual city that you're from, that you spend your time, you live in, have upon your music?
I think a pretty huge influence, actually. There's a few things, especially in the time period when we were first working on the band, that influenced it. One being that it was a backwater. Nobody knew about Portland. So you really had to, there wasn't a lot going on, so you really had to make your own thing happen. It rains a lot, like it does where you are. And that influences art too, because there's not a lot to do except for, you can drink coffee, go to movies,
read a lot,
read books, and do art, and that's pretty much what happens in the winter time. And then the other thing is that because it was a backwater, there was really cheap rent. So if you were a struggling artist, you didn't have to struggle incredibly hard to live in Portland, late 70s and through the 80s. And that was also a really positive thing. We were very lucky in that we got to we had day jobs a little bit on the side, but eventually we really were able to scratch out a living playing 5 nights a week. And that's something that I don't think we could do here now.
No.
And then obviously you've gone on to do lots of other types of projects, other types of music now. So when, like John, when you're working on music for films and commercials and dance projects as well, where does the inspiration come from now?
For films, I have this weird kind of synesthesia where I see the whole score at once, like not in real time from beginning to end, but as a whole object, like a lamp or something. I can see in kind of 3-dimensional terms what the movie needs. And so, there's this great mysticism around creativity, and I don't believe in it at all. I don't believe in writer's block. I think that if you have writer's block, you just don't want to do it bad enough. And so I kind of plunge in fearlessly with an agenda, that and the agenda is whatever texture I'm trying to get to.
And so it's almost like that idea. I mean, you mentioned like not believing in writer's block, so that the idea that like inspiration, but I think the expression inspiration is for amateurs.
Well said.
So it's just like, we were talking about like the Brill Building folks earlier on, the songwriters that would go in, they would write. It wasn't all going to be good writing, but they wrote, and it was a constant thing. And
right.
if they couldn't write for whatever reason, they would write about something they were angry about as well. So it's it's like a muscle. You're constantly keeping that muscle working.
Yeah, the Brill Building especially, and I would lump people like Paul Simon in with that. He has an office. He goes there and writes. Yeah. If you have a job making tables, you don't sit around and wait to be inspired to make the table. You think about the parameters. You go, I want Louis XIV legs on the table, and I want it to have a marble top, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's totally, and then those inspired moments happen where you go, woo, or maybe you have a line in a song and you decide, I'm not going to settle for that. I'm going to go for something better. I'm going to push this higher.
So, and you mentioned you kind of have that kind of synesthesia, which if listeners that don't recognize that as a term, it's actually quite common in a lot of musicians. Where I spoke to a musician the other day who sees B flat as a purple rounded thing in his head, and so it has this kind of visual representation. Because you're doing a lot of music for visuals in one way or the other, does that help when you're having those conversations with directors on their projects, because you can speak in quite visual terms where maybe other people that are doing music kind of keep going back to maybe more technical terms when they're writing?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, to describe my form of synesthesia, imagine an armful of child's blocks, the little ones you stack up, and scatter them across the table. That's what music looks like to me. Now, there's two kinds of directors. There's the ones who can hear and the ones who can't hear at all, because they're just so visual that they don't even hear what you did for their score, And then there's the ones who know exactly, I want to hit this cue here. and that. And you sit down with the director, and it's called a spotting session. And you spot the film, which means they tell you where they want music to go.
And when they're saying where they want music to go, is that coming more of the form of them saying, there is a tension here, we need to have something musically that shows tension, and then release it in the next scene afterwards, or don't release it, release it halfway through the scene when she says this line?
Yeah, well, there's as many types of filmmakers as there are singer-songwriters, so everybody has a different approach. And I often find myself trying to convince the director not to have music in scenes.
So you're ending up not becoming like a muzak, but you're actually you're really adding something to the TV show or the movie.
Yeah. I'm working on a movie right now, a documentary about a soldier that goes back to Vietnam after 40 years. And he wanted to put all ethnic music that he taped off the radio back in 72, and trying to convince him to break up that texture and have some string quartet things when the story veers into the love part. Those are the kind of discussions that happen when you're doing a film.
And for both of you, I'm sure there's been times where you've worked on a project, a musical project, and you've given it your heart and your soul, but for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked out like you'd hoped. Can you maybe talk to us about a time when that type of thing has happened, and more importantly, what are the lessons that you've taken away from that experience?
That's an excellent question, actually, because I think that happens more often than it doesn't happen.
It always happens.
I mean, that's the thing about expectations, is that they're usually never met, even just the artistic ones, because I think, sometimes you go for something and it just doesn't appear in reality like it does when you're imagining it to begin with.
It always comes out different than your initial impulse, especially music. It has a life of its own. You start it up, you wind it up, and then it goes where it's going to go.
Yeah. And some of the things that we love the most, we made a record called Pandora's Box in the mid-2000s. I think we released it in 2010. And that record was, the prime directive for that record was that John and I wanted to put songs together that kind of were a mashup of all the styles that we love. And it's very cinematic, and it's like pop jazz cinema, I think is what the term we coined for it. And I still love listening to that record, but as far as being successful out in the world, it just didn't happen, and that's okay, because you're always disappointed when people don't listen to it and enjoy it the way that you do, if you do enjoy the thing you've created, because you want to share it with people, and that's part of the process. But if it doesn't happen and the work stands up, 10 years later, then that has its own satisfaction. I think you always want to grow as an artist, so you have to do these things whether or think that they're going to be welcomed in the world on some kind of, level or not. And
with this project, you decided the new album, you decided to crowdfund it. So it's interesting because as artists, you've kind of gone through it sounds like you've gone through all the different permutations of being the artist, with the label, self-releasing, and then also now with the crowdfunding thing, where you're using the patronage of your fans that are out there as well, and doing that. So, what was the crowdfunding experience like for yourself? Considering you've done this album releases and music releases in lots of different types of way.
It's one of the. I'm really glad we did it, because it's one of the best ways to connect with people. And I wish that it had existed in the earlier parts of our career, actually, because creating in a vacuum isn't as fun. maybe it gives, at the end of the day, it gives a different result. But actually, I don't think so, because we always have a prime directive musically and aren't swayed by too many outside forces, except for maybe other musicians. But it's really wonderful to be able to. There's a book that I highly recommend to people. It's called. It's by Austin Kleon. It's called "Steal Like an Artist."
Yeah, great.
And then have you read this book?
Yeah, it's a great book, and I think Austin may possibly be coming on the show at some point as well. It's very highly
excellent.
recommended.
Oh, I would love to listen to that. He's fantastic. And follow-up book to that was a book called "Show Your Work," which is always the hard part for us, especially if it's not finished work. And he convinced us through his book that it was a good thing to show the different phases of a project. And so that's partly what the crowdfunding enabled us to do. We had this audience that was interested in what we were creating, and we were able to show them pieces of it. And so then the rest of the world also got to see things as they were being made. And I think it creates a really unique connection to people who are interested in what you're doing. And by the time the actual record comes out, they're just so enthusiastic. It's really wonderful.
You kind of built the. In fact, I had another guest on recently, and we were talking about a similar thing. His name's Corey Huff, and he's also in Portland, interestingly enough. And he works with artists, visual artists, to help them sell their work online. And what he said was something that's really, the artists who have really developed this well to be able to sell their work online have understood the power of storytelling. And
yes.
It's the thing of, having had the good fortune of living in Northern California in the wine area before, and I would often wonder, well, why is that bottle, $20 and that bottle's $200? And
right.
Sometimes the wine genuinely is that much better, but often it's the story. And then when you invest yourself in the story and hearing about the story, whether it's of the artist, how they were creating this work and they're using this type of pigmentation of the colors or whatever the different things are, and you're seeing it evolve over time, you feel so much more invested in it. So it sounds like you were kind of having that experience with your fan base, but that must have been a little bit worrying at first, but scary to do it that way.
It is a little scary to put it out there, but it's so worth it. And that's what Austin's book was basically about. Yes, it's scary. Do it anyway.
Get over it.
You will be rewarded, and we were. So, and there's so many ways to tell the story these days, which is wonderful for artists like us who are actually a little bit introverted and don't go out all the time and
talk about ourselves.
And you can tell the story through visuals and through audio and through actually writing, which John's also a wonderful writer. So we have this wonderful way of connecting with people that we didn't before, and I think that's what makes it more fun than ever.
And I love one of the things that you did as I was doing the research for this episode, as I was going around, and you released a lyric video, and I just thought it was a really beautiful way of telling the story of that song. It was very, and I maybe talk a little bit about the idea behind how that kind of came about, because I believe it was done relatively quickly as well, that lyric video.
Yes, it was. It was kind of one of those things where I was reading a music blog at night, and they were talking about how, well, if you don't have a lot of time or money, lyric videos are a great way to get the music out there. And we were just releasing a single the following week, and Real Thing off of Bagtown. And I thought, I don't know, it just came to me that John has this incredible phone book that he's filled with collage pieces. And I love fonts, and I was going to be a calligrapher at one point. And I love to take pictures. So I got his book, his collage book, and we got a bunch of magazines, and we cut out all the letters that we needed, all the words that we needed for this lyric video, and then I placed them in the collage and took photographs. And I started editing the thing after I was done compiling all the pieces and all the pages, and had a great time doing that, but then realized it was going to take forever, and I didn't have time to spend the next 2 weeks, like 8 hours a day doing it. So John suggested his friend that he's doing this music piece for his Vietnam film, that maybe he could edit it for us. So Larry Johnson ended up editing it, and thank God he did, because he did a really wonderful job. But it was a really it felt like one of the most creative things that I'd done in a long time. It was really, really fun.
And we'll definitely put the link to that on the show notes so people can check that, because I think it's a really cool piece of creative work there. So on this creative journey that you've both been on, can you tell us about any time where you've had any major insights or light bulb moments in this journey where you've kind of gone, okay, this is maybe a direction we should go with the music, or this is maybe a direction we should go with our music careers?
Mm.
And I'm always a little bit careful about using the word careers, because it always doesn't quite feel right as a word, but I need to find a better word for careers. But it's not, I think when I speak to most music artists, the idea of a career is an unusual one.
Well, maybe a career happens while you're making other plans. All of a sudden we look up and we go, hey, we've been doing this for 36 years,
Yeah.
And at first you feel like you're faking it, and then one day you're not faking it. You're just getting on with it. And so I think that's the biggest surprise, is that we're still doing it, that there's still new places to go. And a lot of it happens while it's like we were talking about earlier about the songwriters. They just show up, and then these things happen. Carole King will write One Fine Day, while she had a lot of other probably crappy songs on the burner, So I think it's important to show up. Who was that dancer that you read a book about, and she said just show up?
Oh, I can't remember. I'll think of it as soon as we're off the call.
Yeah.
Is it Twyla Tharp? I think that's her name.
Yeah, Twyla Tharp.
Yes, yeah. Twyla Tharp. Very good.
It's great.
Wow,
great book. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And her message was basically just show up, and there she was, 80 years old, and she found something to do every day. See, the thing is, if you wake up in the morning with an idea of something to do, that's golden. It means you're still interested, you're still engaged, and you've got somewhere to go. The direction is unfolding before you, kind of one step at a time.
Yeah, the inspiration thing happens every once in a while, but it's because of all the little tiny steps you've taken to get there. It's like Lao Tzu says, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Or there was something that I read that a meditation master said, just put your body there. And whenever I don't want to practice, that's what I think about. It's like, oh God, do I want to do these scales again? No. Put your body there and just start. And then the next step unfolds. That's the thing that happens.
And what is some of the best advice that you've both received about living a creative life?
I
think those are the...
Yeah, what we just said, you know?
Yeah, those are the things.
And here's the deal, that our personalities are a set of preferences. It's like we gather these things over a lifetime. We say, I like this and I don't like that, you know? And so those accumulate, and those end up being your style. That the accumulation of your preferences ends up being your style.
And the palette that you draw from when you're creating things.
Or what they call your bag, you know?
Yeah.
And do you ever at times feel that, okay, you've got all that stuff, all that accumulation of things, and maybe just to switch gears completely, go and do that death metal album, or do something completely unrelated to what you've done before, just as a way to, you know, hit the reset button?
Oh, that's hilarious that you say that, because John, in response to doing a funk record, which is what Bagtown basically is now learning clawhammer banjo. And so he spends like 3 hours every night on YouTube with clawhammer banjo masters. Yeah,
I'm all about switching it up. And this was a big switch, you know. spend a year and a half making a funk record, and it's okay, hillbilly music.
Well, that's good. Hopefully, I mean, there's some great, strangely about a banjo, but there's some wonderful teachers now online. Guys like Tony Trishka, great banjo players, doing great online kind of banjo lessons as well. And it's interesting because it seems to be in America, you've got an entire new generation coming into, it's not being called bluegrass, I think it's being really classed as newgrass more than bluegrass, but a new generation of folks in their 20s, when you go to some of these festivals like Rocky Grass and things, that they're coming at this music completely fresh for the first time. But they're also bringing with them some of their kind of musical baggage, because they're coming from other styles that have influenced up to that point, and you're getting some very interesting kind of musical mashups with that.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would have to say Clawhammer's really helped my funk playing too. It kind of goes back and forth, and it's a whole culture. The culture itself is so interesting. There's not just bluegrass, but there's what came before. Bluegrass just started in the 40s.
Yeah.
And so there was a whole antecedent to that what people call old time music. And it's really interesting to explore a whole new world of that I've never been involved in. And so, there's
so we
can something to do.
We can expect the death metal Clawhammer banjo album coming out soon.
Oh man, I'm all about metal. I'm probably the biggest Van Halen fan there is. and
on that, I mean, do you have any online resources or tools or apps that you love and you think people should check out?
Well, I'm not exactly completely comfortable with the modern world, but I wouldn't want to go back, because I love YouTube, because you can learn everything that you want to learn there, like how to make kung pao chicken or how to play the banjo, or how to refinish a guitar. Everything's on there. And I think that's just a lovely part of being a human in this particular era.
I like making movies or editing stuff together on iMovie. I do it on my phone when we're on the road all the time, and it's really easy and fun. And then there's when you're trying to create visuals for the music that you've made. There's a really wonderful app called Canva. It's Canva. And you can create one design, and then it will magically morph it into all the different types of social media sizes that you need it to be. And that's proven to be very helpful and time-saving, and it's very intuitive and lovely to work with. So that's one that I would recommend if people are also visually bent.
Cool, great. And what about, this is always a difficult question I asked towards the end. If you could recommend, I'll let you both answer separately as well, so you're going to get two shots of this. If you could only recommend one record and one book to our listeners, what would they be?
Oh my.
You should have sent that question a week ago.
It always stopped. And the reason I don't send it a week in advance is because I have done that in the past, and then people said, that was a really difficult week because I had to go through my record collection to say what I'm going to do. So that's why I don't give it too much in advance.
Okay, here's mine off the top of my head. The Smithsonian Collection of Folk Music, which was compiled by Harry Smith in the 50s for a record. That's kind of cheating because it's a 3-record set. Okay. And I think the best novel I ever read was Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. And yeah.
Cool. And what about you, Valerie? What would your choices be?
I'm still pondering.
Is there a record or a book that you've maybe gifted more often?
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that's a good way to think of it. I actually have gifted the Austin Kleon books to many people, artists and students, because I'm also a teacher, and I haven't taught for the last couple of years, but I taught for 20 years, and so that was a book that I recommended and gave away quite a bit. So yeah, Austin Kleon, I think for artists is a wonderful two-prong gift. Steal like an artist, and then
show your work.
Show your work. As for records, there's just so many. It's funny because I've been listening to songs more than full albums, just like the rest of the world. And Esperanza Spalding is someone that I really love her work, and I loved watching her go into different creative alleyways, and she's just amazing as a singer, as a bass player, as a writer, innovator person. So I would just recommend anything that she's done.
Fantastic. So final question, let's imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So all you have are the tools of your trade, your instruments, the computers that you use to create the music as well, and the knowledge that you've acquired over these years, but no one knows who you are. You have no contacts. You have to start again. How would you restart?
Wow. It feels like we do that every day.
Yeah.
In a way.
We're doing that now.
I think it comes back down to that thing we were talking about earlier, is that you put your body there. You do the thing that makes you happy in that moment, or maybe not even make you happy. That's the wrong thing. You do the thing that moves the whole thing forward for you in that moment, whatever that is, whether it's practicing clawhammer or banjo, and that ends up, making your funk playing better. But your question is more about how would you get the world to recognize what you're doing? Is that right?
Yeah, how would, the creative work that you're doing, how would you build a following? I mean, so you were able to build a following with the band quite early on as well. Obviously, it took time,
right.
You could do in shows, and the reason I asked this question is I think there's, a lot of younger musicians that may be listening to this just now saying, well, that was great, because you got, in the 80s, the music industry was different and everything.
Yeah.
But for someone starting today, that doesn't have some of those opportunities, so maybe looking at a completely different landscape. What are some of the advice you would give them?
We get that. Yeah, we totally get that. Partly because I'm a teacher, but also because we have this. Our son is a wonderful artist. He did the artwork for Bagtown, the CD or the album we just released, and he's just turned 21 and is trying to figure out how to make his way in the world as an artist, and it's so not easy. I think. That in the beginning, you have to keep your eye on the daily thing of just making stuff. You have to make a ton of it in order to have a body of work that you can share with people, and also so that you can learn and grow. That's the most important thing in the beginning. And to start trying to put it out there and expect for things to come back right in the beginning, I think is also not a good idea because it can influence your work. But at the same time, you do want to be sharing it. Again, you've got to share your work so people get involved in the story of what it is that you're making. I think that's what I would just start doing, and know that there's a lot of music out there. There's a lot of art out there. There are a lot of people sharing what they're doing. If you keep showing up every day for long enough, and this is true for when we started to now, if you can keep going, then eventually people will find you, or you'll find your tribe that wants to support what you're doing. And if that doesn't happen, you better be really, really excited and passionate about what it is you're doing, because that's the only thing that's going to sustain you over the long haul, because not everything is accepted by the world at large.
Well, thank you both so much for coming on the show and sharing with us your creative journey. It's been a pleasure having you both, and also I think it's been really fun having two guests on the show at the same time, which is really nice. And it's interesting, as you talk, you've obviously been working together and creating together for a long time, because it almost feels when I'm speaking to you, there's, you know, your conversation, it flows from both of you. You almost kind of know what the other person, and it's the yin and yang thing going on with you. So I think that it's a really it's a great testament to your creativity as well, that you've been able to kind of build up that relationship as creative individuals. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks again for having us.
What's the best way that people can connect with you and learn more about the new album and learn about all the other projects that you've got going on?
I think our website is probably the best way, www.nushoozmusic, NUSHOOZ music.com. Both of our websites are connected to that. If you scroll down to the bottom, you can see what we've done individually. And there's a page for Bagtown, so that as we made the record, we documented the different moments that happened. And there's a whole page dedicated to that, so you can see the finished product and hear the beginning pieces.
Awesome. And we'll put all these on the show links. People go to jamestaylor.me and just type in, you can type in Valerie Day, John Smith, NU SHOOZ. You're going to find the links and all the show links that we've just been mentioned on the show today as well. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best with the new album, and hope to catch you playing live sometime as well.
Oh, I hope so. That would be great, and would love to meet you too. It seems like we could actually interview you for about an hour.
Yeah.
and find out all kinds of wonderful things, because you talk to a lot of different people, and we'd love to know more.
I'm going to have to take a trip, because I believe Portland is the food capital of America as well. I believe there's some great food there as well. So
yes, it is. So come here and get in touch with us, and we'll do some eating.
We'll do some eating. Great, guys. Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.